I'm Naomi Yadin-Mendick, and I chair the Special Needs and Disability Services Entry Point of the Partnership for Jewish Life and Learning. It's my pleasure to welcome you to Opening the Gates of Torah, our community's 4th annual conference on including people with disabilities in the Jewish community. The conference has grown tremendously since its inception, both in size and in scope. That growth is testament not just to the quality and success of previous years, but also, especially, to the fact that there are still vast unmet needs and barriers to the full inclusion of people with disabilities in Jewish communal life in our area. The goal of this conference is to energize, equip, and empower us to work together to close the gaps and break down the barriers. Today's conference is only possible because of the support and hard work of many lay people and professionals, and the participation of our presenters and panelists. I wanted to thank all of you and to take a few moments to recognize a number of people. First, thanks to the members of the Conference Planning Committee, whose names are listed on the back of the program booklet, and to those who provided financial support, and to all the synagogues and other organizational sponsors of the conference. We apologize to anyone whose name may have inadvertently been left off the program. A program like today's requires significant human and financial resources. Welcome and thank you to Ellen Kagan-Wagelstein, President of the Partnership for Jewish Life and Learning, for your presence and constant support of the work that we do, and to other members of the Partnership Executive Committee and Board. Ellen and other members of the PJLL board who are in the room, can I ask you to just stand for a moment so that people can see who you are? Thanks so much also to Shalonda Elster, the Executive Director of the Partnership for Jewish Life and Learning, who's going to be retiring soon, for your firm and steady commitment to our mission. And also thank you to other members of the partnership staff. And I'd like you to also please stand so we can recognize you. Shalonda is right over here. Finally, this conference would not happen without Laura Lehman, Director of the Special Needs and Disability Services Department of the Partnership. Now it's my pleasure to introduce Rabbi Jeffery Wohlberg, Senior Rabbi of Adas Israel Congregation, our gracious host for today's conference.
Thank you, Shalom. Good afternoon. I want to tell you how pleased we are that you've chosen to hold the conference here at Adas Israel. We feel especially privileged because we know the good work that you've been doing, and we are participants in helping to support it. Adas Israel takes great pleasure in the fact that we have devoted ourselves to trying to make the synagogue as accessible as possible in every way, and we continue to incorporate any of the ideas and suggestions that are made by you, by our congregants, and by others in the community, so that everyone will feel welcomed here, everyone will feel that they can come to our services and our activities, and so that everyone can participate to the maximum possible in Jewish life, which takes place here. So for us, it's a special privilege to welcome you this afternoon. We are constantly trying to improve accessibility, and we hope that all of you feel comfortable. We are trying to improve constantly the engagement of those who come to the synagogue, and we want to provide the material and the equipment that is necessary so that everyone can be enriched by being here at Adas Israel. We want to encourage everyone, both the capable and what Bob Cohn, whom I'm sure many in the community know, calls the handy-capable. We want each person in our community to feel that this is a welcoming place, and so we are inspired by what you do. We have been reading in the Torah, in the book of Genesis. We read about our ancestors in the early stages of development, our patriarchs and our matriarchs, and as we read these stories, we recognize the complexities of their lives, how complicated things which we sometimes take for granted were for them. And I think that that is an inspiring message. How complicated life can be. Life for some of us and life for all of us in unexpected ways. We look back at our tradition and we find that Leah had, as they say weak eyes or soft eyes. Jacob walked with a limp. Moses was kvad peh, he stuttered or he was heavy of tongue. And others in our history, such as Moses Mendelssohn, suffered as a hunchback. And yet all of them created, all of them contributed, and all of them were the greats of our history to whom we look for direction and inspiration in life. So it is with the rest of us. We all have something unique and something special to contribute, and we all have something to gain from that contribution. Just as we've come to speak of ourselves and see ourselves all as Jews by choice, so too do we and should we see ourselves as Jews with special needs. Each of us needs something very special and unique, and together we create community. So we welcome you here this afternoon. We welcome this conference especially. May we learn together how to create the kind of community that invigorates. May we learn together to energize everyone we meet with a measure of God's holiness and presence, so that we will teach by word and through deeds, and together we will leave inspired and create the kind of world in which everyone feels appreciated for the beauty, for the richness, and for the strengths which all of us have. Thank you very much and welcome.
Thank you for your words, Rabbi Wohlberg. Before I introduce our keynote speaker, I want to take just a couple of minutes for a little bit of housekeeping. First, if you don't have time during the conference, then at some time later, please be sure to look through your registration folder, where you'll find many valuable materials, including information about the Partnership for Jewish Life and Learning, and also about Chaverim Connection, which is an exciting initiative to provide social opportunities with typical teens social opportunities with typical teens and college students for children and young adults with disabilities. In terms of logistics, both of Rabbi Artson's workshops will take place on this level. Specifically, the text study during session 2 has been moved to the Kogod Chapel. All the other breakout sessions will be held in rooms on the second floor. Stairs are located just past the registration tables. On the right-hand side, there's a short flight of steps and some doors, and then the main staircase goes up from there. Also, the elevator is located past those stairs through the confirmation hall, which is also on the right side. A quiet room for anyone who might need a few moments to themselves is also going to be located on the second floor. And we are going to try to have people upstairs before and in between sessions to help direct you. Things get a little bit confusing up there. So hopefully we can get everybody where they need to be. And if you have any questions at all, please don't hesitate to stop somebody who looks like they know where they're going and ask them for help. Also, please take advantage of the break between sessions to enjoy refreshments, visit the display tables, and share with each other in the Gerwitz Hall. I apologize if I didn't pronounce that correctly, and that is also on this level. Now, I am so pleased to welcome and introduce to you our keynote speaker, Rabbi Bradley Shavit Artson. Rabbi Artson is the Dean of the Ziegler School of Rabbinic Studies at the University of Judaism in Los Angeles, and also serves as Vice President of the University of Judaism. Under his leadership, the Rabbinical School has grown from about 45 students to over 80 students from all over the world. Rabbi Artson is a cum laude graduate of Harvard University and was ordained with honors by the Jewish Theological Seminary in 1988. He has served as rabbi of Congregation Eilat in Mission Viejo, California, as the Executive Vice President of the Board of Rabbis of Southern California, and in many other leadership positions. Rabbi Artson's latest book is Gift of Soul, Spiritual Resources for Leadership and Mentoring. He also writes a weekly online Torah commentary and the widely distributed column, Dear Rabbi. Rabbi Artson lives with his wife Alana and his twin Shira, a typical teen, and Jacob, who has autism. I'm sure that Rabbi Artson will share with you any other things that he wants you to know about him, but rather than delay, it is my pleasure to introduce Rabbi Brad Artson.
Thank you very much for being here today, for being who you are, and for refusing to be invisible. In the Jewish community today, invisibility is the easiest thing to be. And insisting that you are here, and insisting that you are to be seen as who you are, is an act requiring courage, perseverance, and diligence. I accepted the invitation to come here today because of my service to two masters. I work for one who cannot be seen, but who is nonetheless everywhere visible in the world, who bids me to travel here to you, to affirm your courage, and to assist you in your fight. And even more, I work for my son, who told me several things I need to tell you. Let me introduce you to two teenagers. One teenage boy has had a girlfriend for 2 years. He says she sings like an angel and has the most beautiful smile of any person he's ever seen. He was in a play last year, and he wrote a poem that they set to music, and it became the theme song for the entire play. He has published essays online and in books, offering novel interpretations of Torah and applying them to human life. He has several play dates every week. His best friend is a boy named Neil. He loves a kid named Jonathan. They love to go to the beach. They like to go bowling. Second kid, at age 2.5, started to be unable to play with the other kids in his preschool and made the other kids so uncomfortable that the teachers of the preschool approached the parents about removing the child from the class. The child was diagnosed PDD, which is the fancy medical way of not hurting parents' feelings, and tells you absolutely nothing. Pervasive developmental disorder is the fancy word for more than one thing not going the way you wanted it to go. Of course, you knew that. That's why you brought the child in for a diagnosis. Child was placed on medications, and at age 5 had a severe relapse in which the behaviors of his autism became more extreme and more troubling. This child needs a shadow everywhere, at school, at camp, at play. This child has meltdowns at moments of challenge, at moments of unexpected change, at moments when desire is too strong. Here's the news, which some of you have guessed. These two children are the same person. It makes all the difference in the world when you describe a person as a person, or you describe a person as a set of symptoms. Jacob is not autism. Jacob is Jacob. None of us are the sum total of our symptoms. And very few of us would sound well if all you described were our problems. We assumed that Jacob couldn't read or write because he appeared not to be interested in reading or writing. And the most miraculous day of his life was the day that my wife took him to an FC specialist, a facilitated communication specialist, which is a mode of communication in which you hold the person's hand and provide resistance away from the keyboard so that they can then get the muscular rhythm so that they can type using a keyboard. The first thing Jacob typed was, "I am autistic, I am not stupid." Jacob's struggle over the last several years has been to remind himself and the people around him of that basic truth. That if all you see is his autism, then you create a circle of expectations in which you doom him to be trapped by his symptoms because you never expect him to move beyond them. And therefore you never give him the goals or the tools to be himself. By the way, this might be a good time to turn off your cell phones and pagers. And if you brought candy, you might want to unwrap it now. Who brings candy to theater? Jacob's struggle, the struggle of those who love him, is to remind himself that he loves life more than he hates autism. To not allow himself, in his moments of despair, in his moments of depression, to shrink within the confines of his condition, but to remind himself that his humanity and his vitality are greater than his challenges, and that his label is only his label when it is helpful. I'm here today to give an angry and constructive talk. The challenge is, I don't really want to give it to you. I want to give it to the 100,000 Jews who are not here today, who are in this community. But I am a rabbi, and rabbis are used to yelling at the people who are there on behalf of the people who are absent. It's a venerable tradition. We've been doing it for thousands of years. I'm here to say that people are not their labels. Labels are a reflection of the distortion and the fears of those who create the labels. They are not the reality of the human on whom the label is pinned. I'm here to tell you that people are not tragedies, and that the proper expression to greet a person with is a smile, not a look of sorrowful concern. Jacob asked me to add to that list that people are not dogs, by which he means he's tired of people encouraging him with the same forms of encouragement reserved for pets. Good boy, nice job, come here. He likes to be addressed like a human being. Thank you, Jacob. Would you try that again, Jacob? Wow, that was better than last time. So I want to lay out to you 5 Jewish principles for working with the full range of human beings. And I want to start with a confession. There was a time in my life where I thought I knew what disability meant. I haven't a clue anymore. I used to think I knew what a typical person was, but I realized I have never met one. So, I don't have much to say on the subject of special needs in a typical world, because I've never met someone who doesn't have special needs, and I don't know what a typical world would be. I do know what a world would look like that made room for all of us. A world in which it felt itself to be enriched by diversity, by our differences, as a source of celebration and not as a threat. We have done a poor job in celebrating the richness of God's creation. So 5 Jewish principles. His job is much more fun than mine. The first is Tselem Elohim. We are all made in God's image. This principle is not a mathematical principle. Normally, in arithmetic, if you divide something by 2, you get half of the original figure. But in the realm of human dignity, anything less than 100% is 0. You either recognize the full dignity of the person in front of you, or you render it invisible. Tselem Elohim is non-negotiable and beyond compromise. In that regard, I invite you all to be radical. We cannot barter this away. It was not ours to dispense with. By virtue of your being human, you are irreducibly who God meant you to be in the world, as you are. And each time you make yourself small, each time you repackage yourself to look like someone other than yourself, you erase God's image in the world to that degree. It is blasphemy to make yourself small. Second Jewish principle. Ve'ahavta l'reacha kamocha. You must love your fellow as yourself. I mean by that 2 teachings. The first, you expect people to see you for who you are, not as the member of a class or a group, not as a problem to be solved, but as a unique individual. If you cannot give that to the person in front of you, you are not loving them as yourself. In fact, you're not loving them at all. And you go to great pains to accommodate your own idiosyncrasies. The only people who don't know how many idiosyncrasies they have, no, I'm going to phrase that differently. Being married and a parent, I am blessed to have people who point out my idiosyncrasies all the time. And I think my idiosyncrasies are perfectly reasonable. So I routinely accommodate them. To love someone as you love yourself is to honor their idiosyncrasies and to accommodate them, not to try to argue with them that they're being unreasonable. The Torah commands us, Mishpat Achad, you must have one law for yourself and for the stranger. There is a way to pervert this teaching. It was the French author Anatole France who quipped that the law in its majesty equally forbids rich and poor from sleeping on park benches. This is a perversion of one law. A Greek approach, you remember the Greek myth of the fellow who had the Procrustean bed? Procrustes owned a bed, and if you were too tall for the bed, he would lop off the parts of you that spilled over, and if you were too short, he would stretch you until you fit. This gruesome and pagan application of one law for everyone is that you must accommodate the one law, and this is the opposite of the Torah's intention. The Torah's intention is an Einsteinian relativity in which the law is made to apply to everyone equally, honoring who they are as God's image. See Principle 1. Number 4. Easily forgotten, Ibdu et Hashem b'simcha, you shall serve the Lord in joy. It's so easy for well-meaning people who don't think they have special needs to get all mopey when they're in the presence of people who they think should be the grateful recipients of their forbearance. Nobody likes a mopey face. And frankly, nobody likes the smug entitlement that's lurking behind it. If you cannot serve with joy, then have the decency to get out of the way. Because life is so short, and we should be dancing our way through it. And there are a million ways to dance. And our job is to bring joy into the world. Now, to bring joy into someone's life, you have to know them well enough to know how they dance, what makes them sing, what makes them smile. Your mission is to get to know people in their concreteness, in their uniqueness well enough that you can be a vessel of joy. This is not an option, this is a commandment. You are commanded to rejoice. And then finally, Yesh tikva la'acharitcha, there is hope in your future. You strip away hope from a human being, and you have as good as killed them. None of us can live without hope. And our tradition divides humanity into two categories. The people who think they are realists, who remove hope from the world, these people ultimately perish, and their causes with them. And the dreamers, who look at the world and see what it could be, and then make it so. There is, the prophet tells us, hope in your future. Abandon hope, and you have no future. So, my friends, honor and dignity are a birthright. You do not earn them. You do not deserve them. and you cannot forfeit them. They're not yours to give away. Honor and dignity are the intrinsic right of each and every human being, at all times, indivisible. Judged by that bar, the Jewish community is sadly lacking. Back at home in Los Angeles, we had a group of so-called typical teenagers in USY, which is the teen group, and they decided to do an afternoon experiment in which they would feel what it was like to have special needs. So they said that what they were going to do is take turns being blindfolded and then walking around the room with blindfolds on. Jacob said, "That won't tell you what it's like to have a special need. If you'd like to know what it's like to have a special need, put a blindfold on everyone else in the room and then walk around for a half an hour." It has been Jacob's experience that to have a special need renders you invisible instantly to anyone who notices you have a special need. Jews have been trained, it's an odd sort of counterintuitive thing, that it's rude to notice differences. And if you have a difference that can't be ignored, then the polite thing to do is just ignore the entire person. This is done by compassionate, decent people, by saying hello to the person, that way they know you know they're there, and then ignoring them for however long the function continues. So they walk in the room, they say hello Jacob, and then at a 3-hour worship service, they don't say another word to him or look at him again for 3 hours. This is what it means to have good manners. The Jewish community, I believe, does this because we have exchanged our birthright for an alien porridge. We have so bought in to Western definitions of achievement and success that your worth is your grade point. And you become a human being once admitted to an Ivy League school. Perhaps that's why for us abortion is not a divisive issue. Because life doesn't really start until you have a 6-figure salary and a suburban home. So because of that, parents brag about their children's grades, about their children's jobs, about their grandchildren's grades and jobs. I have a secret to share with you. They've actually studied the correlation between grade point, university attended, and life satisfaction. Here's the bad news that the 100,000 people who are too busy working on their honor roll projects don't know. There is no correlation. As my high school teacher wisely observed, rush through high school, rush through life, and then you're dead. If we don't start to retool our community to enjoy the lives we have, we will continue to spend our entire existence preparing for the life that we're too busy to savor. And so we push our ambitions and our sense of normativity on ourselves and our children, and we rob them of their childhoods. No wonder that we revert to infantile behavior as adults because we were deprived of it when we were kids. There is a silence on this subject. Jews pat themselves on the back as though they have accommodated those with special needs and then think they're finished. But anyone who is labeled, anyone who loves someone who is labeled, has had a Jewish institution say something like the following: Rabbi Artson, we would love to be able to accommodate your son, but unfortunately we don't have the budget for it. Let me translate that into simple English for you. What they're saying is, Rabbi Artson, your son is not a smart investment in our money because there's no return on the investment. And therefore, he's not worth our sacrifice. By that line, well-meaning people think they have discharged their duty, and they have created human garbage. Not the person they won't accommodate has turned into garbage, but a person who creates a yardstick in which people's value is measured by their economic ability, by their financial prowess, by their political connections, or their academic achievements, has thereby created the criteria by which they themselves will one day be ruled useless, worthless, and trash. Our value is found precisely to the degree that we are able to love and able to care. That and no other criteria establishes our claim on the title human. There is such ignorance, such fear, such hostility. Do we have to live in that world? Isn't it possible to create a world in which I can help you in the area in which you have a need, and then you can help me in the area in which I have one? Can't we create institutions whose bottom line is the well-being of all of its people and not the state of its budget? Can we recognize that the worth of humanity will never be measured objectively, and that the very effort to create a hierarchy of value in which some people are worth more than other people is a betrayal of the most fundamental convictions upon which Judaism stands. We are, all of us, the children of one Creator. We are, all of us, equal reflections of that inner light. And we have been placed on this earth to be eruptions of goodness and irrepressible forces of righteousness, to turn the tide of indifference and slothfulness and cruelty, which is so plentiful now. I flew to Washington, D.C., that heart of darkness, to say to you now, there will be a time when they will look back on this era as a period of barbarism and of unbelievable cruelty. Children won't believe the way civilized so-called people treated each other's brothers and sisters and nieces and nephews and children. And we are called to be the vanguard of that change. Do not accept anyone putting you down, pushing you away, telling you that accommodating you is too much, too arrogant, too expensive, too costly. A Torah is rendered invalid for ritual use if even a single letter is missing. And on Yom Kippur, the holiest day of the year, a congregation that does not invite in sinners is not a congregation. And so long as a single soul cannot find a home in the sanctuary, in the classroom, in the day school, or the playground, then our buildings and our institutions are an abomination in God's sight. Thank you. To entertain questions, comments, responses. Let me just remind you that if you give a speech, you have to live with these people tomorrow. I'm going home.
I was just wondering how your comments are received by other rabbis that deal in religious communities, and what specific kinds of things you've been able to do.
I will always repeat the questions. The question is, how are my comments received by other religious leaders? And what kinds of changes have I seen affected as a result of those comments? Most of the evil that is done in our society is done by well-meaning people who act thoughtlessly. Not with malice. They act thoughtlessly and they react out of fear. So I think of myself as a wake-up call. And I bring Jacob's message to my colleagues and peers. And in some ways, I guess I feel like an undercover agent. People are able to hear my message because I start off sounding very pleasant and nice. And on the surface, I look like them. But I really am a brother from another planet. And they don't notice until it's too late. I have seen the Jewish community and the larger American community starting what looks to me like a great awakening. I measure that both programmatically and episodically. Not really a word. So, 3 years ago, we were flying to Hawaii, and Jacob knows that when you get to the airport, you have to take your backpack and put it through that luggage thing, and then you get it back. But in Hawaii, you don't do it that way because of agricultural stuff. So he put his backpack on the luggage conveyor belt, and the guy handed it back to him. That was bad. So Jacob flung himself on the ground and started screaming. And there he is, screaming his lungs out on the floor of the airport in Hawaii. And I'm feeling pretty bad about this, and Jacob's feeling pretty bad about this, and people walk by and say things like, "Can't you control your child?" "No, we like to do this. This is a hobby we have." Out of the 10 comments we got, only one was, "Can I help you in some way?" And the others were all people who felt the need to pass judgment on Jacob's childhood or my parenting, or both. This past year, we were invited to Chicago, where the Board of Jewish Education has Merkaz, a center for serving people with special needs, and they have an annual event. You'd love this. They do an annual event. It's a fundraiser, and they pick 3 people to honor, 2 of whom have to have special needs. Can you imagine that? Actually honoring someone with special needs? What a concept. And to be the keynote speaker, they invited Jacob. Wow. People with special needs have something to say? So, Jacob, of course, was so excited that he didn't sleep for 5 months because of his gig. And he wrote his speech out, and he had me deliver it. But the reason I'm telling you this story is that on the flight back, he was, of course, so excited because he had kicked butt in there that he was not the most tranquil passenger on the plane. The guy behind us during the dinner leaned over and said, "I'm sorry to disturb you, but your son's bouncing is making my meal jump all over the place. Could you stop him?" And I said, "I'm really sorry. Jacob is autistic. He's trying his best not to bounce." And the man said, "Don't say another word. It's perfectly okay." That was surprising enough, but when we landed, 4 people came up to Jacob, not to me, to Jacob, and said, "You were amazing on that plane. We're so proud of you." And I thought, how come I didn't get a copy of the memo when it went out? But I think that all of the media attention is starting to melt the iceberg. And there's a long way to go. But I do see a gradual diminution of resistance, in which the Jewish community is starting to take responsibility, along with the general community, for all of its people. We are by no means out of the woods, but I do see the resistance starting to go down. I taught a session at the last 2 conventions ago of the Rabbinical Assembly, which is the Association of Conservative Rabbis, on inclusion of special needs, and the workshop ended up being standing room only. They had to bring in extra chairs into the room. I don't think that would have happened 30 years ago. So I think there is a desire and a willingness, and we have to be willing to put ourselves on the front line. That, it turns out, is the real war on terror. Others? Sir?
I just wanted to say, I think a lot of it, you coming on, talked about it, and that's been very helpful to us parents as children with autism, because your willingness to stand up and talk about it has helped us. So
Thank you for that. Jacob has helped me to see the... Yes, sorry, it wasn't really a question. He was buttering me up. He thanked me for my willingness to talk publicly about Jacob's autism as empowering others to do the same. Jacob has told me in no uncertain terms that my continuing shame at his autism is the only thing that's shameful. I'll tell you a great story. So we pray at Temple Beth Am in Los Angeles, which has this thing called the Library Minion. It once met in a library. It hasn't met in a library for decades, but the name stuck. So it's the Library Minion. It's a lay-led, Ramah-style congregational service. It's very nice, lovely people, like every congregation. And Jacob loves the Torah. You know, most autistic people pick some object that becomes the focus of their passion. Lucky me, Jacob's focus and passion is the Torah. So whenever they take the Torah out of the ark, Jacob starts jumping up and down and squealing. I, being the parent of an autistic child, know that my job at that moment is to wait for someone to say something really cruel, which happens virtually inevitably. So Jacob starts jumping up and down in front of the Torah and squealing, and the ritual chair starts to walk over. And I think, here it comes. And he says, Rabbi Artson, we need to talk to you. Yes, I say. He says, listen, you know, every week we bring out the Torah, and every week Jacob runs to the front of the room, and he jumps up and down, and he squeals, and I'm kind of gearing myself up for this thing, and he says, and we all look forward to that, because that's how we should all feel when the Torah comes out. But the only thing that ruins it, is the look on your face. Would you mind stepping outside until the Torah service is over? I have never received a greater gift in a synagogue than that gift. Because I could finally let it go. I could finally say, I'm in a community where I know that was unfair. They see, you get no points for making Lenore cry. They see Jacob's love of Torah not as something distracting or pathological, but as a reminder of what we're all supposed to be doing. And that can be a community. We have made a fetish out of decorum in the Jewish world. These fixed seats are the death knell of human emotion. Because you can either focus on keeping your body from moving, or you can focus on feeling, but you can't do both. And in traditional congregations, people move and rock and make noise and squeal and sob and jump and dance, and that's called, this is the technical term, davening. I do Jacob's haircut. It occurred to me a while ago that asking him to sit while I cut his hair is impossible. So I typed with him and I said, Jacob, would you rather stand up? And he typed D-U-H. So he stood and moved his body, and I cut his hair, and his head stayed perfectly still. Duh. Can we bring that into our sanctuaries? Can we say, here's the deal, people. We'll let you old people bring in your hearing aids that ring the whole damn time if you let us bring in our squealing children. And we'll even throw into it, if we get to bring our squealing children into the sanctuary, you'll get to stop complaining about why there are no young families here anymore. But telling people that they should bring their children into the sanctuary and not make noise is telling them to not bring their children. And telling them to not bring their children is to tell them to go away. If your synagogue doesn't have a lot of special needs people, it's because you have driven them away. How do you respond when someone in the synagogue says we are not a social service agency? I can't give you my full response because this is being recorded. If you come visit me in my home, you can meet with my dog who hears the full response and she can share it with you. a social service agency. You are either in the service of the Kadosh Baruch Hu, the Holy Blessing One, or you are in the business of robbery. There is no middle ground. You are either serving all of God's children, or you are fleecing them of their money. There's no central compromise here. If you do not make of your sanctuary, school, agency a place that serves the community, there is no legitimate reason for your budget. My job is to persuade people of that. Your job is to persuade people of that. You can't take no for an answer. We can't compromise that.
I'm Rabbi Lynn Landsberg, and the reform the agency has ordained one woman who is hearing impaired. She had interpreters throughout her 5 years of rabbinical school. Do you see any future with rabbis with special needs becoming, even wanting to go to rabbinical school, unless going to rabbinical school, and do you foresee even congregations even accepting them?
So do I see the possibility of ordaining rabbis with special needs, and do I see the possibility of congregations employing those rabbis? I'm going to treat those questions separately. Jacob told his friend Neil that his ambition is to be the first nonverbal autistic rabbi. You'll notice, those of you who are close textual readers, that implies that he won't be the first autistic rabbi. Just the first nonverbal one. We admitted a student 3 years ago who's quadriplegic. And he left our program for reasons that had nothing to do with his abilities, and he may well come back. I promise you that as long as I am the dean of the Ziegler School, special needs will not be a factor in the admission of rabbis into the conservative movement. And then, when they're ordained, they'll be just as miserable as the rest of us. Do we have time for that? About congregations, that's going to be a slower process. So I guess I will just say two things. There are lots of things a rabbi can do in addition to congregational work, and all it takes is the one right place. So I wouldn't worry about whether congregations will be prepared to hire someone. That rabbi found a job and is doing a great job. And all it takes is the one place that sees the rabbi and not the ability. One last question. You have had your hand for a while. Go ahead.
A little one. Sorry that I missed it. But when you were talking about your second principle in the Ahavta Hare et Kamocha, you said that had two subparts, and I missed the second part.
The question is, I mentioned there were two aspects to V'ahavta l'reacha kamocha, you should love your fellow as yourself. What is the second of those 2 points? The problem with the Brad Artson School of Speaking is that I am a channel for the Holy Spirit. I don't remember, you're laughing, but it's, okay. So I don't remember a thing I've said. It's being taped, you can go look at it. Maybe one of you took notes, and maybe one of you remembers what's the second thing? Okay, so the second thing is to love others as you thank you. The second thing is to honor people's idiosyncrasies as much as you honor your own. Okay? Okay. Thank you very much. Enjoy the